The hospital waiting room was eerily quiet, the fluorescent lights above buzzing faintly as a heavily pregnant black woman clutched her stomach, her face twisted in pain. She stood at the reception desk, breathless, whispering, "Please, I think the baby's coming." A nearby nurse glanced up, then looked away. Seconds later, a white male doctor approached, scanned her from head to toe, and, with a cold stare, said, "You're not my patient. Wait your turn." She gasped, leaning against the wall for support, but no one moved. Suddenly, a loud pop echoed in the hall. Her water had broken. She let out a choked scream, dropping to her knees as a pool of fluid spread beneath her. "Please help me," she cried. But before anyone could react, her body gave out. And right there on the hospital floor, her baby began to emerge. Eyes widened. Phones came out. But no help came fast enough. Her name was Danielle Parker, a 26-year-old schoolteacher from Atlanta, Georgia. It was supposed to be the happiest week of her life. Her baby girl was due any day now, and despite the challenges of being a single mother, Danielle had stayed strong. She had no family nearby, and her fiancé had walked out on her 5 months into the pregnancy, leaving her to handle everything alone. Still, she remained hopeful, attending every checkup, working as long as her swollen ankles could bear, and preparing a tiny nursery in her modest apartment. On that morning, she had felt a strange pressure in her lower back, and then sharp cramps that stopped her mid-step. When the pain didn't subside, she called a rideshare and rushed to the nearest hospital, one she hadn't been to before but was listed in her insurance network. She believed, like anyone would, that the moment she stepped into that emergency room, someone would help her. She didn't expect to be treated like a burden. She didn't expect the color of her skin to weigh more than the urgency of her womb. But in that sterile, indifferent hallway, that's exactly what happened. When Danielle stepped into the hospital lobby, one hand gripping the counter and the other pressing against her belly, she was already in visible distress. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with tightly pulled hair and a tired expression, barely looked up. "Name?" she asked flatly, not even meeting Danielle's eyes. "Danielle Parker." I think I'm in labor," she said, trying to breathe through the pain. The woman glanced at the screen, tapped a few keys, and muttered, "You're not in our system. Do you have an appointment?" Danielle shook her head, now sweating. "This is an emergency," she whispered. "Everyone's got an emergency." The receptionist snapped, waving a clipboard. "Fill this out and take a seat." Danielle stared at the plastic chair across the room, horrified. There were only 2 other people waiting. Neither appeared in distress, yet no one offered help. A nurse passed by, catching Danielle's teary eyes, but said nothing. She felt like a ghost, like she didn't belong there, like she wasn't seen. The walls around her suddenly felt colder, not from air conditioning, but from something deeper, a kind of silent, practiced neglect. And beneath it all, her contractions were getting stronger, closer, more urgent. But still no one came. Just as Danielle doubled over in pain, gripping the counter with white knuckles, a tall man in a white coat strode into the hallway. His name tag read Dr. K. Mercer, and his expression was as sterile as the room he walked through. Spotting Danielle, he frowned and said, "Are you even registered here?" She nodded frantically, trying to explain between gasps, "Please, I'm having contractions. My water could break any minute." He didn't come closer. Instead, he glanced at the receptionist, who shrugged. "She's not in the system," she muttered. That was all he needed to hear. Dr. Mercer scoffed, waved a dismissive hand, and said, "Then I can't help you. Go to your assigned OB or an emergency facility in your network. This isn't walk-in care." Danielle's eyes welled with tears as she begged, "Please, I don't think I can make it anywhere else." But he turned his back, disappearing down the corridor. His coat billowed behind him like a flag of indifference. The hallway fell silent again, except for the quiet, rhythmic groans of a woman in labor, left behind like she didn't matter. Danielle sank slowly to her knees, gripping her belly as another contraction tore through her like a lightning bolt. "Somebody please," she whimpered, her voice cracking under the weight of fear and pain. Her breaths became short and panicked. her hands trembling as she tried to steady herself on the cold tile floor. A security guard glanced over from the entrance, then looked away, uninterested. The receptionist rolled her eyes and picked up her phone. Danielle looked around the room. Faces turned away, shoulders stiffened. It was as if the entire room had decided to ignore her suffering. "I'm begging you," she sobbed, tears now streaming down her cheeks. "I'm a human being. Please." Her knees buckled completely, and she collapsed sideways, lying curled on the floor, her dress soaked with sweat and fear. She clutched her stomach as the next wave of pain hit, and still no one moved. A sudden, wet gush echoed across the lobby. Danielle's water had broken. Gasps rippled through the room, but no one stepped forward. Her scream pierced the silence, raw and animal, as her body convulsed in agony. "The baby, she's coming," she cried out, unable to stop what nature had already begun. Her legs trembled violently as she lay on her side, gripping the air, searching for a hand that wouldn't come. And then a small, fragile head began to crown. Her cries became a mix of pain and panic, but by the time a nurse finally rushed over, it was too late. The baby slipped from her, landing onto the cold, hard hospital floor with a sickening thud. The room froze. A woman in the waiting area covered her mouth. A man started recording. Danielle's eyes widened in horror. Her baby had entered the world alone, not in a delivery room, but on a filthy tile floor. Chaos erupted seconds after the baby hit the floor. A nurse who had ignored Danielle earlier now screamed for help, frantically sliding in with gloved hands as the tiny newborn lay still, slick with fluid and barely moving. "Code Blue. We need a crash team, now," she shouted as two others sprinted in with equipment. But while the medical staff scrambled, the damage had already been done. The front lobby, moments ago silent and apathy, was now filled with gasps, footsteps, and flashing phone cameras. One bystander, a young black woman, filmed the entire scene through tears. "She begged, y'all," she whispered into her phone. "She begged." The baby let out a faint, high-pitched cry, weak but alive. Danielle, dazed and exhausted, reached toward her child with shaking arms, sobbing uncontrollably. The nurse lifted the newborn, gently, whispering, "I've got you, baby. I've got you." But the haunting truth hung thick in the air. They all had waited too long. Amid the chaos, one nurse moved with more than just urgency. She moved with compassion. Her name was Marissa Tate, and unlike the others, her face was filled with both horror and guilt. She knelt beside Danielle, placed a firm but gentle hand on her shoulder, and said, "I'm here now, sweetheart. I'm so sorry." Cradling the newborn, she carefully wrapped the tiny body in a warm towel, checking vitals with trembling hands. The baby whimpered, alive but fragile. Marissa looked Danielle in the eyes, voice breaking, "Your baby's breathing. She's okay. You're both going to be okay." As other nurses rushed to assist, Marissa whispered, "They should have helped you. What happened here wasn't right." In that moment, she wasn't just treating a patient, she was witnessing an injustice and silently vowing it wouldn't be buried. Within hours, the video had exploded online. The footage of a pregnant black woman collapsing on the hospital floor, begging for help as staff looked away, stirred outrage across social media. News outlets picked up the story. Woman forced to deliver baby on floor after hospital refusal. Civil rights advocates, healthcare watchdogs, and politicians demanded answers. Protesters gathered outside the hospital gates, holding signs that read "Black Mothers Matter" and "Healthcare, Not Hate." An emergency investigation was launched, and the hospital's PR team scrambled to contain the fire, but it was too late. Screenshots of Danielle lying in agony were broadcast across national television. People weren't just angry. They were heartbroken, horrified by the cruelty, the negligence, the silence. What happened to Danielle was no longer just a personal tragedy. It had become a symbol of a systemic failure, one that could no longer hide behind walls, scrubs, and silence. Dr. Kevin Mercer, the man who had turned his back on Danielle, quickly found himself at the center of a storm. His name trended online within 24 hours, not with praise, but with fury. Former patients began speaking out, alleging years of cold treatment, dismissive remarks, and racially biased behavior. A former nurse even revealed he'd once refused to see another black woman because she looked like a Medicaid case. Under mounting pressure, the hospital announced Dr. Mercer had been placed on indefinite suspension pending investigation. But for many, it wasn't enough. Legal experts weighed in. Lawsuits loomed. Protesters chanted his name outside the hospital, demanding accountability. And while Dr. Mercer remained silent, hiding behind legal counsel, the public had already passed judgment. His license wasn't just in question, his legacy was shattered. Sitting upright in her hospital bed, baby Ava sleeping gently in her arms, Danielle Parker finally spoke to the world. Surrounded by cameras and reporters, her voice trembled but carried strength. "I begged them to help me," she said, her eyes glassy with emotion. "I wasn't just ignored, I was treated like I didn't matter. Like my baby didn't matter." Her words struck a nerve. This isn't just about me. Black women across this country are dying, being dismissed, being told their pain isn't real. We deserve better. My daughter deserves better. The room was silent as she finished. They saw me as a problem. But now, they'll remember me as a mother who survived. Her truth, raw and undeniable, ignited even greater support. Danielle's story became a rallying cry for justice in maternal care across America. Baby Ava survived. Doctors confirmed she was stable, though she'd need close monitoring for the first few weeks. Danielle never let her out of sight again, holding her close like a shield against the world that had failed them both. But even as the headlines faded and public rage moved to the next tragedy, the scars remained. Danielle couldn't unsee the faces that turned away. She couldn't forget the cold tile beneath her, the sound of her child's first cry echoing off a hospital floor. Still, in the quiet of her home, rocking Ava gently, she whispered, "You were born in fire, but you'll grow in love." The system had tried to silence her, but her story had been heard, and the world would never look at a waiting room the same way again.